Howdy! Today I'm going to try and see if I can turn a few small tops. I've got a couple of blocks over here that I need to put centers on. Start off with a block of wood about 5 inches long, 1.5 to 2 inches square or something like that. I make them down to even 3/4 inches square. Still makes a nice little top, but this is a good size to practice on. So I'll go ahead and mark the centers on it, and then we'll swing over to the lathe and turn a few tops. So I really like that Lee Valley center finder, because what it does for the putting the cross on, if it happens to be perfectly square, all the lines line up, and if it happens to be slightly off square, it gives you the extra lines that give you a real small square to select the center on, which makes it really easy to make the center then. So now that we got the centers marked on both ends of the blank, I like to put I'll swing the camera around here a bit so we can see the lathe. And I like to put in a step center. I like the way they drive. It acts like a safe drive, plus it gives you a little more drive than the actual safe drive. Lock that in, tighten that up a little bit, check to make sure it rotates freely, set my tool rest. Nothing more important than using a face shield. Okay, so we're going to see how this works. I think the camera angle may or may not need to be adjusted, but we'll try the first few here and see what happens. First thing I do is I rough it out with my spindle roughing gouge. This is spindle work. Makes it nice and easy to make a cone, or I'll make it a cylinder, and I'll put a tenon on one end because I like to hold them in a chuck. Here I'm just mounting it in my Talon chuck. And what I like to do, I like to bring the tail center up just to make sure it is centered, but I just like to bring it up just to make sure it's centered before I tighten the chuck up. That just helps keep it aligned. Every time you mount something in a chuck, it may be slightly misaligned on line. You have to straighten it again. This way just makes it a little bit less. So when we make these tops, this will be probably the bottom of the top. The handle will probably be about this far out. The next top starts about here, so its handle will be here, and the third top will be about here. So on a 5-inch blank, I generally get 3 tops out of it, and that seems to be pretty comfortable to work with. I normally start roughing this down while the tailstock's in place, and then I take the tailstock away and then take light cuts, and we'll see how it goes. There has been times when some of these have popped out of the chuck, but I mean, that can happen to anybody, so if it happens to you, don't be surprised. It can happen. Just make sure you have your face shield on and take light cuts with sharp tools. I like to use my trusty 3/8 spindle gouge. A lot of times I'll try and make a lot of tops just using a skew. When I feel really brave, I'll use a skew just for skew practice, but this is my go-to tool for making tops and when I'm making a bunch of them. Ride the bevel. I like to make a nice point, but not too sharp. If it's really sharp point, it spins a little longer, but it doesn't last as long. And I found that if it's just slightly rounded over, they spin really good, keeps the young people entertained, and they last a lot longer. One of the things I like to do is put a little decoration on these, and in order to get the decoration on without having to change tools, I take the handle down a little bit smaller, and then I try and make a real fine cut with the spindle gouge, and the wood starts to vibrate, and it acts like a chatter tool effect. It actually does put a pretty neat effect on the top, and they're always different. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. The squealing noise is the effect of the wood vibrating, because the stem is a little bit small, and what it ends up doing is it puts kind of a unique chatter tool effect on the face when you try to make a light cut. I like to add a little bit of color, so I like to add the color on before I take them off the lathe. Makes it a little easier to apply. what I found sometimes too is you put one color on, and these are Art Mine's permanent marker, and if you put two colors on, it sometimes the chatter tool will give it a unique effect. But I know little people gravitate towards a top that has color on it much more than they do just a plain top. So I've started putting color on all of them. And as luck would have it, I didn't catch it and it's on the floor, but I'll just reach over and pick it up. And there we go, nice little spinning top. And you can, I don't know if the camera will show it, but there's the chatter tool effect, and that's all just done with a spindle gouge. And it's always unique. And it definitely draws little people's attention, even the adults. They all come and take a look at it, and if they're just plain wood, it looks pretty interesting. But when you throw a little bit of color on it, and especially when you put the second color on top of one, it gives it a real nice effect, and it catches the light. And if you're at a market or something like that, these will sell twice as fast as the ones that aren't colored. Okay, so we'll make a few more. And this is being done in real time, so I'm not going to speed the tape up or the video up when I post it. I'll post it in real time. That way, for any of the new turners that are trying to gain some confidence in spinning a top, they can see how long it takes me. When I made my very first top, it took me a considerable amount of time longer, because I was learning how to sharpen my tools, and I was learning how to make sure I took light cuts. And that's all part of the fun of working with a lathe and making children's toys. So we'll go ahead and make 2 more tops out of this blank. It's important to note that you make the point first, and then when you're doing the chatter work, you always stop short of the point, so that you have all of the chatter work display on the base of the top. It doesn't go onto the place where the point is, otherwise it will wobble. One of the things I found when using these felt markers, it's always nice to slow the lathe down so that it doesn't dry the tips out too fast. If you put them on when it's really fast, the wood will get warm and it'll actually dry out the pens really quickly. They don't last very long. That one's just about done. So there's another look at the chattering that happens on there, and that's just with the spindle gouge. And it didn't show up as much on the bottom, but most of the time people are looking at them this way, and when they're sitting there waiting for them to be picked up and spun with that little bit of chatter work on there, it just gives it a nice touch. I was going to pick that up very well, but you can see a little bit of the chatter work. On this side here it shows a little bit more, but the trick to getting the chatter work is to have the confidence to take this down to about 3/16. Even 1/4 inch will be okay, and then this piece actually wobbles when you're trying to do this fine cut. It vibrates, and if you take really light cuts, it makes a nice little vibrating mark, and it like a little expanding scroll as you're cutting in. And I think it's just kind of neat. Some people use a chatter tool, and you can use a chatter tool, but when I'm making tops, I generally make 15 or 20 at a time, and I don't like changing tools. I just use my spindle gouge, and we can make tops. Very good. Thanks for watching.